Leaders, sustainability champions, and friends around the world. It brings me great pleasure to welcome you all to the upcoming regional panel sessions for the annual UN Global Compact Conference Leaders Summit. The following 3 sessions are given in association with the Stockholm Plus 50 conference held by the United Nations Environment Programme, whose opening was just live-streamed to you. For those of you joining this session through Stockholm Plus 50, UN Global Compact is a UN initiative launched in the year 2000 and the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, working to unite businesses for a better world. My name is PHILIP THORMARK, and I am the Executive Director for the Global Compact Local Network here in Sweden. As the Secretary General just mentioned, the first World Conference to make the human environment a major issue was held here in Stockholm, Sweden, 5 decades ago. I am proud that Sweden is once again co-hosting this important conference, but distressed by the fact that we have not come further. The delivery on numerous principles from the Stockholm Declaration remains to be fulfilled, and the stakes have never been higher. Because today, 50 years after the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, we find ourselves facing a triple planetary crisis: climate disruption, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution. And while the road ahead faces much uncertainty, there is one thing that has been made very clear in the last few years. Human activity is putting immense pressure on this planet, and our window to remediate our behaviors is rapidly closing. As the Secretary General has urged us time and time again, we must channel all our energy into reducing emissions, increasing investments in adaptation and resilience, and making good on our climate finance commitments to developing nations. Governments and heavy emitters must cut emissions by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero emissions by 2050. We must end our fossil fuel addiction and look to renewables, and we must protect the poorest and most vulnerable who have contributed the least to the ongoing climate crisis. The private sector has a crucial role to play here as a driving force for innovation and cooperation, and the sustainability agenda must remain a priority for all. No one needs to be reminded of the numerous crises we have been dealing with the past few years, but we do not have the luxury of postponing the climate transition any longer. Let us together translate ambition into action and follow through on our commitments to keep the 1.5-degree goal alive. Examples of translating ambition into action will be shared in the next panel session, where leaders and UN Global Compact participants from all over Europe will discuss the role of the private sector in tackling the triple planetary crisis. And after that, we will hear 2 additional interesting panel discussions on women leadership in decision-making, as well as businesses' humanitarian response to the war in Ukraine. I really look forward to listening to these discussions. But before we dive into these, I will now be joined by a leader of the UN Environment Programme to talk about the aims and the ambitions of the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. I'm very happy to introduce Ms. PATRICIA KAMERI-MBOTE, Director of the Law Division of the UN Environment Programme. Welcome, Ms. KAMERI-MBOTE, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm very delighted to be here today. And of course, UNEP was born when Stockholm was established, so we are celebrating a birthday as well.
Great. So just to start off, for those in the audience who either missed the opening or perhaps not familiar with the Stockholm Plus 50 conference, could you tell us a little bit about what the conference aims to achieve and maybe also what you look forward to the most?
Of June 2022, we are celebrating the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment and 50 years of UNEP. This is a commemoration with no negotiated outcome, so it will be a time for us to reflect collectively and rethink the world we want. The world today is different from the world in 1972. We have achieved much, but more still needs to be done, especially also thinking that we are in the third year of a global pandemic and only 8 years to the end of 2030 to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We cannot lose momentum on achieving the SDGs. And I think having the 5th of June 2022 as the World Environment Day with the theme Only One Earth, which is also the slogan for the Stockholm Conference in 1972, gives us hope and something to look forward to. So we need to have strengthened policy making, as science has already delivered and continues to deliver. And we also need to build environmental multilateralism into global processes. So in essence, we are celebrating, but we also know we need to roll up our sleeves because a lot still needs to be done.
Great. And what do you think the biggest challenge will be to tackle in the coming discussions at the conference? And how do you think we should address it?
I think we need to rethink the way we live and do business. And UNEP has a report that it issued last year on making peace with nature, which calls on us to correct our conventional thinking and also correct conventional GDP to include social and environmental factors. So whilst global thinking before was grow now, clean up later, now it has changed to near zero waste economy by 2050. We need to scale up change in the way we eat, the way we live, the way we build, the way we move, empower our lives to achieve a carbon neutral and nature positive economy, to recalibrate our economies and societies towards more sustainable and equitable models, and also put in place right policies, infrastructure, and technology to enable changes to our lifestyles and behavior, which can result in the 40 to 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We have the solutions. We are not helpless. What we did, we can undo.
Thank you. And I have a question. You are the director of the law division, and you have, of course, worked the major part of your career with environmental law. And last year, the UN Human Rights Council recognized for the first time that having a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a human right, which the Secretary General also addressed in his introduction speech just now. And from your perspective, how do you hope that this resolution will impact environmental activism, for one, and perhaps more generally, could you tell us a bit about the critical role that environmental law plays in tackling our environmental challenges?
You know, many times we talk about the failure to implement law, but we don't address the instances where law is actually implemented and leads to positive outcomes. The environmental rule of law highlights environmental sustainability, connecting it with fundamental rights and obligations. Because without the environmental rule of law and the enforcement of legal rights and obligations, then environmental governance wouldn't happen. We are trying to integrate needs with essential elements of the rule of law: adherence to law, coherence, respect for rights. And the implementation of the rule of law has been bolstered, as you say, by the October 2021 recognition of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right by the UN Human Rights Council. This landmark UN resolution is an important step towards achieving sustainable development, poverty eradication, inclusivity, and gender equality. But we should remember that the roots of the right to a healthy environment can be traced back to Principle 1 of the Declaration of the Stockholm Conference in 1972, when the people who were there stated the fundamental right to freedom, equality, and adequate conditions of life in an environment of equality that permits a life of dignity and well-being is important. And many states, actually over 155 states at the national and regional levels, do recognize these rights. And that gives us a very good foundation for building a just, equitable world where sustainability is achievable. Again, we have very many multilateral environmental agreements that have been passed in Stockholm, and the right to a healthy environment will help in accelerating the attainment of the objectives under this. And what we really need to do is to strengthen the capacity of countries to enforce the environmental rule of law by, for instance, looking at environmental crimes that drive biodiversity loss and deprive communities and governments of future revenues and development opportunities. We have science to help us with the IPCC and IBES, and working with the scientific community, we can actually strengthen the environmental rule of law.
Thank you so much. And soon we will have an interesting panel session. And as a closing question, just to set the stage for this upcoming panel, what role do you believe that the private sector has in fighting the triple planetary crisis at hand? And what would you say are some of the key things that they should turn their attention to?
I think the time when environmental concerns were for states is long gone. And we have seen in different contexts dealing with the ozone layer depletion, dealing with mercury, dealing with chemicals or persistent organic pollutants, that businesses are key to sustainability. And I think if there was ever a time, the business case for sustainability has never been stronger than it is now. Actually, it is 2022 that we can make a year of ambition for business transformation to ensure long-term sustainable finance and also activities of business actors. And at UNEP, we have the finance initiative, where corporate actors with assets worth 47 trillion US dollars have signed up to realign investment portfolios to the Sustainable Development Goals, and others can actually join. Business has contributed to the problem, but it is also part of the solution. Moving beyond business as usual models is what we should be doing, because there are opportunities, and environmental actions aren't always loss imperatives. Industry plays a key role in promoting the circular economy. And when we look at what is happening now with the agreement at UNEA 5.2 to deal with plastic pollution, we can see that a circular economy tackling plastic pollution is actually dependent on the work of business actors.
Mm. Thank you so much, Ms. KAMERI-MBOTE, for your valuable insights regarding the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. And I think with this, it is time for the first panel session, and I will leave the floor to the session's moderator, Mr. Ole Lund Hansen, Chief of Global Operations at the UN Global Compact, to introduce the session and the speakers. So thank you from me. Thank you again, Ms. KAMERI-MBOTE, and over to you, Ole.
Thank you.